Welcome to the klutchkittengaming podcast, where I play an indie game for 5 hours and let you know whether or not it's worth your time and money. Hello and welcome everyone, this is James Moeller, also known as Clutch Kitten, and I'm so glad that you're here for episode 65 of the show. Today we're going to try something a little bit different. Instead of cluttering up the intro with a bunch of random stuff, let's jump right into this week's game. Today we're going to be talking about Sayonara Wild Hearts, which is a pop album video game released on September 19th of 2019. It's currently available on PC, Apple Arcade, PS4 and Switch, and was developed by Simogo, which is a two-man shop based out of Malmö, Sweden. The Sim stands for Simon Flesser, the Go stands for Magnus Gordon Gardebach, I'm pronouncing that wrong, I'm sure, and the O stands for Och, which is the Swedish word for and. These two guys have been making art and games together since 2010, but I think it's pretty safe to say that Sayonara Wild Hearts has been their biggest hit to date. Currently, Sayonara costs $12.99, and according to howlongtobeat.com, it takes an hour and a half to complete the main story and has some additional content which can add an hour or two more. When it comes to controls, the bulk of the game is mechanically pretty simple. There are some sequences which add complexity, but overall, you can expect pretty straightforward and arcade-like controls. I personally played Sayonara on my Switch, but I imagine that it works great on mobile and PC as well. My heart is broken. My life is flipped upside down. My only thread of hope is in my dreams, in the tangible tones that fly through my mind. I'm on the other side now. A different me? I'm called the Fool, but even a fool can carry the hope of harmony in their heart. Sayonara Wild Hearts is an abstract game about love, pain, heartbreak, excitement, and, well, fill in the blank with another emotion. It's a game that primarily takes place in the protagonist's dreams, where you play as their other self, a masked biker called the Fool. Parts of the gameplay play out on an astral plane as you travel into the heart of a tarot card, and from there, the settings are mostly made up of futuristic cityscapes, long roads in the desert, and forested highways. If you're finding yourself confused at all, welcome to the club. It's unusual because in most games, the soundtrack plays a supporting role to the gameplay, narrative, and art, but in Sayonara Wild Hearts, those other elements play a supporting role to the soundtrack. This game has been described as a euphoric music video dream, which I think perfectly captures the heart of what this game is. Just like how many music videos are compilations of weird and disjointed scenes that create a narrative, Sayonara Wild Hearts presents more of an emotional experience than a clearly defined story. It's super cool because you're basically playing through an entire album of music and you get to experience the story arc of what the sounds are meant to convey. Although I was still confused about the story when I finished, I did appreciate how well the narrative looped back around to conclude the game. This isn't a title to pick up if you're looking for a plot that takes you from point A to point B, but for a game that provides an emotional and almost spiritual narrative, I think Sayonara nails it. Let's move on now to the gameplay. Clearly, this is a very ethereal game. So what is it that you actually do? As I alluded to earlier, Sayonara Wild Hearts is an arcadey experience. In a lot of ways, it's actually similar to an arcade racer like Outrun. Whether you're on a skateboard, driving a car, or riding a motorcycle, most of the game revolves around your character moving fast, dodging obstacles, collecting points, and fighting enemies. Also, as I pointed out a minute ago, the gameplay is there to support the music. The whole flow of the game revolves around the soundtrack, so in some ways, you can also draw some parallels to the rhythm game genre. In a rhythm game like Guitar Hero, the music has a defined beginning and end. You as the player aren't controlling the length of the experience. Sayonara, in a similar way, is a heavily choreographed game that you get to participate in. Since that's the case, if you ever hit a barrier or die to an enemy, the game is quick to pop you back into the level to play out the rest of the song. At the end of each song, you're given a grade based on the amount of points and collectibles you were able to pick up along the way. Overall, I really enjoyed Sayonara's gameplay because of how well Simogo played to the strengths of the experience. Clearly, if you're creating a rhythm game or something similar to this, it's crucial that the flow of the game isn't hindered. I mean, part of the fun of Guitar Hero is the challenge, but the game is not at all enjoyable if you're constantly failing out of a song. So on one hand, you need to design a game that doesn't hinder flow, but on the other hand, you also need to create gameplay that's iterative and fresh. In the case of Sayonara, Simogo maintained a steady pace by keeping complexity to a minimum and by providing generous, hidden checkpoints. There were only a couple spots where I failed the section more than once, but on both of those occasions, the checkpoints were generous enough that I didn't get frustrated. The game popped me right back into the experience, so I didn't lose more than a beat. Simogo also did a wonderful job iterating on mechanics. Again, this game isn't complex, but new systems do get added as you progress through the experience. Also, the grading system at the end of levels provides a nice challenge for people who want to do more than just beat the game. When it comes to keeping things fresh, Simogo achieved that through the use of different vehicles and through changing up the environments. The difference between the car, skateboard, and motorcycle isn't all that big, but they felt different enough that I didn't get bored with playing the game. When it comes to gameplay weaknesses, only two aspects stood out as a little bit annoying. First, the flying sections just didn't feel good to me. There aren't all that many, but the way your character handles in that space feels loose and imprecise. Second, I found that a couple roadways were pretty confusing when it came to their visual perspective. I would be cruising along, confident that my character would dodge an oncoming obstacle, but then I would get close and I would somehow hit it. Maybe this complaint is more of an indication that I need to go to the eye doctor, but I think it's still worth mentioning. To round out this section with a positive, I want to mention a level that I found to be absolutely incredible. It's called Parallel Universes, where the roadway is shifting between two universes on every downbeat of the song. It creates a super trippy section that shows off some creative and quality design. Now that we've talked about the narrative and gameplay, let's discuss the art and sound design. On the art side, this game looks stunning. The visual style isn't particularly detailed, but it's stylized, colorful, and complements the songs perfectly. You feel the rush as you fly through levels, and the visuals guide your emotional state from moment to moment. On the sound design side, I'll first mention the VO, the voiceover. There isn't a lot of VO, but what's there is performed by Queen Latifah. Most of you have probably heard her voice before, but if you haven't, her voice fits the bill well and has graced many a movie and TV show before. When it comes to the soundtrack, I'm a huge fan. The songs lie somewhere between synth and pop and are performed by Daniel Olson and Jonathan Eng. Quite a few of the tracks actually reminded me a lot of the band Churches if you're familiar with their music. Overall, what makes the music so good in this game is that it works together with every other piece of the design to create a harmonious and satisfying journey. Let's summarize now with some positives and negatives. First off, on the positive side, I appreciated how well the story closes its narrative loop. Given how abstract it is, I wasn't expecting a concrete ending, but I was satisfied with what was done. Second, the gameplay achieves a delicate balance of flow and complexity. There are enough mechanics there to feel like a game without taking the player out of the emotion of the moment. Third, the visual style and sound are superb. They are truly the stars of the show and are only enhanced by the other elements of the game. First off, on the negative side, I would have liked the small flying sections to feel tighter to control. Second, I think the roads in a couple levels should have been tweaked to more accurately show where you need to position yourself in order to miss obstacles ahead. We've made it now to the final boss. This is the part of the podcast where I let you know whether you should slay the game and buy it, flee the game and avoid it, or farm up and wait for a sale. My verdict for Sayonara Wild Hearts is to slay this game. I absolutely cherish games like this. It's short, fun, and a lovely game to experience by yourself or with a friend. There's also a mode which lets you play the entire game without any breaks between levels. If you want a musical game to lose yourself in for an hour or two, look no further than Sayonara Wild Hearts. As always, thank you all so much for taking the time to listen in. Whether this is your first time listening or your 65th time, I want to quickly remind you of a few ways you can hang out with me outside of the podcast. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at klutchkittengaming, on Twitter at kkgpodcast, and via email at klutchkittengaming@gmail.com. Feel free to reach out and say hi, and if you happen to enjoy the content I produce, I'd love it if you told a friend about the show. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you in game.